Welcome to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast, where you get help and guidance through the chaos of parenting a child with anxiety or OCD. This show is for educational purposes and is not intended to replace the guidance of a qualified professional. Here's your host, child therapist, Natasha Daniels.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. Today, I want to talk to you about a very common thing that our kids with childhood OCD or anxiety struggle with, and that is managing the feelings of depersonalization or derealization. And I want to talk to you about what it is, why it's so common, and how to help our kids with these struggles. Before I get started, I do want to thank NoCD for sponsoring this episode. NoCD offers affordable, effective, convenient therapy, and they're available in the US and outside the US. You can schedule your free 15-minute consultation to see if NoCD is the right fit for you and your child. Just go to treatmyocd.com. That is treatmyocd.com. I'll leave a link in the show notes as well. If you are also interested in the AT Parenting community, that is my in-depth online member community where we do weekly live classes, monthly support group calls for parents, kids, and teens. We have an app where you can directly message me at any time when you're struggling, message other members, and get that support. And plus, you get over $500 worth of my courses in my online school, atparentingsurvivalschool.com, for free as a member. You get free access to that in the app and on our member website. Our wait list is growing, and so we are most likely going to have a wait list only opening. I will not advertise that. That goes only to the wait list. And so if you want to get on the wait list so you're notified, it's definitely a good time to do that because I'm seeing it grow. So you can go to atparentingcommunity.com and join the wait list. And you, and only you, those of you that are on the wait list, will be notified when we do a quiet wait list only opening, because we're not opening the community for another couple of months, but you can get in right now when we open it up privately. So hope to see you over there. All right, let's jump into today's episode. So I wanted to do this episode because it's something that we're dealing with at my own house. And I did notice I've only done one podcast episode on this topic, and I thought it's worth circling back and talking about again, because I feel like this is one of those things that parents don't realize is a component of anxiety and OCD. And so sometimes we don't know why our kids are saying these things. When they say, I don't feel real, or they say things like, I feel like I'm on the outside watching everything, or am I in a dream, or am I dead? I'm trying to think of all the ones I've heard from my own child. A lot of times people don't realize that this is something that a lot of us are going through. So let's just briefly talk about what it is. Depersonalization and derealization are very similar. They're both kind of under the umbrella of like dissociations. And with depersonalization, you question your own existence, your own reality. Am I dead? Am I in a dream? Am I real? It's all about the person themselves. In derealization, it's like, are you real? Who are you? In my house, it's like, are you a robot? Are you really my mom? Which can seem psychotic, but it's not. It is just that derealization of, I don't know if I am in a dream or not, or I don't know if you're real, or if we're in a simulation and none of this is real. And so they are very similar. They're just different flavors. What is interesting though, they are different parts of the brain that cause this. I found that fascinating when I just did a little research before I jumped on here to record this. I was like, I just want to know the biological mechanisms, which we won't get into because it was very biological and sciencey. But I encourage you to Google it or go to ChatGPT or ask the biological origins of it and what part of the brain is causing depersonalization versus derealization. And they're two different parts. With depersonalization, it is the brain's way of trying to protect itself. It's like a coping mechanism of removing and cocooning the person, but it's an overcompensation to the point where they don't feel like they're real or they feel like they're observing, they're on the outside looking in. And so it gives them this really uncomfortable, scary feeling. With derealization, it has more to do with some erroneous like input. We won't get into that. It is fascinating though. And so they are different and they happen for different reasons, but a lot of times you can have both. My daughter has had both. I have had both. And I'm sure there's a genetic component to that, because it's interesting how I struggled with that when I started to have panic attacks, and then she's struggling with it, which I do feel like that's interesting. But it is common with our kids with anxiety and OCD because they're more at risk for having depersonalization and derealization and dissociation type of behaviors. A lot of times their body is in fight or flight mode, they get overwhelmed, and so it does happen sometimes when it's like an automatic coping mechanism that becomes an issue in and of itself. And so we miss this sometimes because they already have that deer caught in headlights look. And so it can look like just an anxiety attack or a panic attack unless you really start to explore what's going on with them. And then they might say things like, I don't feel like I'm real, or I don't feel like I'm really here. So it's not dangerous. It's not physiologically dangerous, but it feels very scary. Just like a panic attack or an anxiety attack feel very scary, but they're not physiologically dangerous typically. So let's talk about what that can feel like to kids. So when we talk about depersonalization and derealization, I'm going to talk about that in general. With depersonalization, I know that I struggle with that. I started having those issues when I was 19 and in college. And it feels like all of a sudden, everything around you, well, this is how it felt for me. It's different for each person. But for me, it felt like all of a sudden everyone's talking, but it's like I can't hear anything. And I'm like on the outside looking in. And there's a feeling of, I'm not really here. Like, what is happening? It's a scary feeling. And so sometimes our kids will articulate it and they'll ask for reassurance and they'll say things like, am I real? Oh, what's interesting actually too about the genetics, this just popped into my head. My sister had this too. And when she was younger, she would hit her head and say, I'm not real. I'm not real. And she got therapy. And I was so annoyed because I wanted therapy. I really needed therapy. But because my mom was so alarmed by her hitting her head and saying she wasn't real, she was like, something's seriously wrong with the little one, so I'm going to go and take her and get her therapy. But really, it was just depersonalization, which is something that I struggle with a couple of years later, and now my child struggles with. So interesting genetics there. But we can normally tell that our kids are going through this by them saying they're experiencing these things, asking us reassurance questions like when my daughter wasn't sure if I was her real mom, she would ask me questions to test me. And it took me a little while to figure out that she was actually struggling with derealization, that she wasn't sure that I was who I said I was. And so it can seem really scary because it can feel real paranoid and psychotic, but it is a very common anxiety or OCD theme. Sometimes you may not notice, they may not say those things to you. They might just want you to do things. They might want you to pinch them, or they may want you to touch them, or they may want you to do something for reassurance, and you may not even be aware of why they want you to do that. And sometimes they just look like they're blank. It's like a blank stare, which could be a lot of different things. So got to rule out other things that can cause that spaced out look as well. A lot of kids with anxiety and OCD do get this because there is that fight or flight system. And sometimes the coping mechanism is to numb and shut down. This is different than people who dissociate after trauma and they like float out of their bodies and they're up in the ceiling. That is very common in like sexual trauma, where people leave their body and they dissociate with their physical body. This is different. This is more of a sensation, and it's more cerebral in that they get stuck on thinking about it. And that's where the anxiety and OCD comes in. But it is a response sometimes to chronic stress and panic and this protective disconnection. But when you're dealing with like sexual abuse, we're talking about severe dissociation floating out of your body kind of sensation. This is not as extreme, although it feels just as scary, of being like disconnected. I feel like disconnection is a better word for what's going on. We're talking about depersonalization and derealization. Now, it can get a little tricky because it can just be anxiety based or it can be OCD based. And that's when it gets, now we're in the woods, and you're like, it's hard to see the forest from the trees as far as what's anxiety and what's OCD. With anxiety, it can be tied to panic and panic attacks and anxiety attacks. And it can become its own thing of anticipating the depersonalization or the derealization, or giving it value and worrying about it, and just it's making you anxious. It happens and it makes you really anxious. Then you get anticipatory anxiety about it happening again. And then it becomes this vicious cycle of worrying. Very common with panic disorder, because when you are panicking, I know I started experiencing derealization and depersonalization. I had both when I had the onset of panic attacks. So same year that I started developing panic attacks, I developed this as well. And they went hand in hand. Normally I would start to feel like I wasn't real, or I'd start to feel like I'm not really here. And then I would have a panic attack. And so then there was anticipatory anxiety about the sensation, of not feeling like I'm really here, because it led to a panic attack. And then it makes you not want to leave. And so it turns into agoraphobia, where you want to stay in your house. If you're young and you're still with your family, it makes you want to stay near your parent, particularly your mom. I didn't have that. I was already in college, but I didn't want to leave my apartment because it felt unsafe. I could have one of these episodes and not be able to control it. And so that is how it manifests with anxiety. I didn't have OCD related to this. I've never had OCD, clinical OCD. I've had some subclinical little flavors, but nothing that's ever fully developed. It stayed firmly in the anxiety category. With some people, it can turn into existential OCD, where they are searching. So they're like searching for the answers, or searching for, am I real? Am I in a simulation? Is nothing real? And they want the answer. Like they need to have this certainty of, this is not a dream, or I am real, or this isn't a simulation, or I'm not dead, or you're not a robot or an alien. And so it can turn compulsive, whether that is over researching online and searching that existential OCD kind of compulsion, or testing your environment. Like my daughters really moved more into, it starts off as anxiety, but she can swerve into the OCD lane sometimes, where she was asking me questions. That's very compulsive, to check and see if I am really who I am. Recently, she was like not sure if she was a ghost, and so she was waving her arms around to see if I would notice. That's compulsive. That's not anxiety. That was a compulsive behavior. And it can be anxiety producing and compulsive. You can have both. And so how do we help our kids with this? Because it can seem like a really different thing to deal with than other anxiety and OCD themes, where you're like, I don't know what to do. And sometimes the things that we want to do actually can make it worse. And so sometimes what we want to do is overly reassure them that they are real, or that they're not in a dream, or that they're not dead. And unfortunately, especially when we get into the world of OCD, that compulsive reassurance is never satisfying enough. And then there becomes this dependence on it of, I need to be near you so that you can reassure me and let me know that I am real anytime I'm feeling unreal. So now I've got separation anxiety because I need to be near you in case this feeling happens. You see that happening also with emetophobia, the fear of throwing up, and separation anxiety, and panic disorder and anxiety attacks. Like, my coping mechanism is you, my mom, and so I need to be near you at all times in case I experience a panic attack, or the fear of throwing up, or I start to feel nauseous, or I start to feel like I'm not real. The panacea to all that is just you being next to me. And now I've got separation anxiety. So you can see where it really can blow up when we're trying to do the right thing and reassure our kids, but it's creating a loop, an unhealthy loop of dependency that is actually fueling the anxiety and OCD and not improving it. That doesn't mean that we don't give them reassurance. I think this is the part that parents often get confused, and even some therapists confuse, is when we say don't reassure them that they are real, or that they aren't going to throw up, or that they are not sick, like whatever we're talking about in any theme, that doesn't mean we can't offer reassurance. It changes the content of the reassurance. And that's what I'm saying in this situation too, because the first step is always education. I say that for every theme and everything that we talk about is the first step is education. And so I'm going to want to educate them on what is depersonalization, what is derealization. And you don't have to split hairs on one or the other. Just call it one thing. I mean, it really doesn't make a difference. I do have a YouTube video on explaining this directly to kids, teens, and young adults, and I'll link it in the show notes. But that is your first step, is I'm going to explain that to them, not when they're in the middle of having this situation, but in general. We're going to talk about the theme, and we're going to talk about how it shows up. We're going to normalize it. We're going to validate it. This is what's happening. It's kind of a mechanism in the brain that is there to try to protect you, but it feels really weird and it doesn't feel very protective and it feels uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous. We're going to normalize it, and we're going to talk about how it feels and maybe link them to other people or videos of talking about it so they can feel like they're not alone. That is the first step. And then when they're struggling with it, we're going to talk about a lot of different techniques to use in the moment when they're panicking. But when they're asking for reassurance and they're saying, am I really alive? We're going to reassure them, I'm sorry that you're struggling with some depersonalization right now. Right? I'm reassuring them that they're having this struggle, and I'm sorry they're struggling right now. And what tools can we use to support you? I'm not getting into a vicious cycle of, no, you are real. No, this isn't a dream. Sometimes with my daughter, now that we're more advanced and she has a full understanding of what this is and she's experienced it, sometimes when she says, I worry I'm in a dream, we've gone to the other extreme where we've talked about, does it really matter? Whether you're dreaming or not, you're still here and you're experiencing this. Whether you're dead or not, we're still here, we're still experiencing this. Anxiety and OCD wants you to get hooked in and know for sure. And so the answer now, a lot of times will be like, I don't know, but aren't we having a great conversation? That's not something you'd start with. That could be actually very overwhelming and triggering, but it's something we get to over time. Just like with her emetophobia, the fear of throw up, we eventually got to the point where if she said, I'm afraid I'm going to be sick, tell me I'm not going to be sick, I'll say, I can't tell you that for sure, but I know no matter what, that you'll be able to handle it. That's not very reassuring, but she knows that the actual reassurance of saying you're not going to throw up, you're not going to be sick. First of all, we can never guarantee that. Sometimes she is when she's overly anxious. Sometimes she does throw up. So I'm not going to lie to her, but we don't want to guarantee anything or give that certainty, because that actually feeds the disorder. And that is a struggle. So we can reassure them and validate their struggles. We can reassure them that we know they can handle this. We can reassure them that they are okay, even though I know it feels like they're not. We can validate that this is a struggle and validate that they're feeling like they're not real, and that can be overwhelming. And then we can coach them and prompt them to use their skills. What are those skills, Natasha? Do tell. All right, I will. After the break.
It's time we put help directly in our kids' hands. Introducing Crushing OCD course for kids and teens.
It was way more helpful than all the other therapy we've ever done because we didn't really know what to do. So we weren't really doing it before. So the course helped to figure out what the exposures are and how to do them.
We're not in therapy and find it really hard to find an ERP trained therapist here. So we're currently with like the public health service, but again, they don't seem to be trained in ERP. It's filled that gap that we don't have that was desperately needed.
This was really well timed for us to use between therapists and to help us get off to a good start with this new practice.
It was easy to use. I was able to do it from my phone or also on the computer.
There's different ages, so there were younger kids, there were teenagers, and so that was really nice too, to have a variety of ages where it wasn't just geared towards younger kids or older kids. It was a nice variety.
It's helpful for our kids to hear it from this third party as opposed to just us saying it.
I really liked the offense and defense defense method. I love working on poking at OCD while it's sleeping. It makes it a little bit easier to do, and it's kind of fun. I'm planning on using it to work on my fear of like holding or touching batteries and stuff like that.
So it was really helpful, and I think a lot of other kids would like it. I thought that I was like the only one who had worrying about the weather and stuff. And then there was somebody else on there who worried about the same thing, which was really helpful.
Seems less scary to work on stuff now that I've watched this class, and I'm more interested to work on it.
I like trying to do more exposures still, and before I wasn't, I just didn't want to do them.
I've worked on some of my bigger compulsions and been successful.
I realized that it was helpful to do like the exposures. Before it was like really, really hard. It's still hard, but it's helpful to know that I need to do them.
Before there would be a lot of battles about it, so it is definitely less loggerheads.
Really, really good course and super helpful.
Definitely would recommend this. It's really easy to follow. It's nice bite-sized videos. I really like the worksheets that go along with it, and I think it's really helpful.
To learn more about this course and register your child or teen, go to atparentingsurvivalschool.com.
Welcome back. All right, so now you have a pretty good understanding of depersonalization, derealization, how to educate your child, how to offer validation and reassurance that they can handle whatever they're experiencing. And let's talk now about some actual skills that you can use with them. So in general, when you are straddling both anxiety and OCD, this is the caveat before I jump into this, you want to be careful that any coping mechanism can turn into a compulsion. And so you just have to be a little bit aware of that. So, even breathing, even exposures with OCD can become a compulsion where I have an intrusive thought and then I feel like I have to instantly do an exposure to negate the intrusive thought. Well, that becomes a compulsion in and of itself. Or I'm having this feeling that I am not real, and then I have to do, this particular skill in a certain way in order to not have that feeling anymore. But the problem is, if I'm hoping that these skills that I'm going to talk about will eradicate this sensation, it won't. I mean, it's the same thing with emetophobia, or like when you're trying to not be nauseous, you become more nauseous. When you try not to feel unreal, you feel more unreal. And then when you're doing these coping mechanisms and you're like, why isn't it working? Why isn't it working? And then you actually become more anxious. And so it's really helpful to have a conversation with your child, teen, or young adult and say, these are some things that you can do to get back into your body. The first thing that we want to do is recognize that we're having a depersonalization or derealization experience. So, okay, I'm having some struggles in this right now. The second thing we want to do is to not fight it. And that is so hard to do when you're in the moment. But when you can train your brain to relax into it a little bit more, and the goal is not to get rid of the feeling. Because just like panic attacks, just like anxiety attacks, the more you try to not have the attack and the more you panic about the attack, the longer it lasts. And so it is a very counterintuitive approach to lean into it and say, yep, I'm feeling this and I don't control how long this feeling is going to happen. And in the meantime, I'm going to get back into my body and I'm going to do some things that help me get back into my body as I ride this out. That is the important part, as I ride this out. Because if I have this anticipation of I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and this is the outcome, then I'm sabotaging myself. And so it's not A plus B equals C. It's I'm going to do A while B is happening, and then C will eventually happen. I know that sounds so stupid, but it is actually really helpful to have that shift. We're not doing it. The goal is not to get rid of this feeling as fast as you can, because it won't. You just want to ride the wave. I like that term for panic attacks, anxiety attacks, resisting compulsions with OCD, and for depersonalization and derealization. Ride it out. You got to ride the wave out. And while you're riding the wave out, get back in your body. What is she talking about? About get back in her body. What does that mean? Let's talk about it. I'm talking about grounding techniques. So when you are having those experiences of depersonalization, derealization, a lot of it is like everything feels unreal, whether you feel unreal or your environment feels unreal or both feel unreal. And so any kind of way that to like feel your body and get back in your body, what we call as therapists grounding techniques, are really helpful. And so let's talk about what some of those are. As I was looking for some resources to link for a member of the AT parenting community, their child was going through this, and I was talking about grounding techniques, and I wanted to link just some website to show them like what simple grounding techniques are. I came across this website and I found it to be really good, especially on this topic. I wanted to mention it. It was created by, I think, somebody who struggled with depersonalization and derealization. And then they created this website, and they have support groups. They're not a therapist, but it looks like they're partnering with a therapist. I don't know much about this website, but it looked really, really great, to be honest. I will link it. But I really liked, they have a page on grounding exercises for depersonalization and derealization. And it was phenomenal. It's like really thorough. So I will link this entire website. It's called Release DPDR, which is depersonalization, derealization. And it's a really comprehensive list of grounding exercises. It's actually one of the most comprehensive ones I've seen. So it's a great website. And I'll go over some of them, and they just basically curated a lot of grounding exercises from other websites, but it's a really nice list. The first one, and the most obvious one that therapists talk about, is the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique. Every therapist talks about that. And none of this is rocket science, but it's finding what works for your particular child, teen, or young adult. And maybe you show them the website if they're older and you say, see which one works for you when you're in the middle of it. I know for me, grounding didn't work. It works for me now, but it didn't work when I was 19. What worked for me the most was eating an orange. I know that is so weird. And that actually is a sensory coping mechanism. So it's part of the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. It was something I can smell and something I could taste, something I could feel. So maybe I guess we could say it was kind of part of that. But it always had to be literally, it had to be an orange. So in my college apartment, I always had a bunch of oranges in my refrigerator because it worked. But 5-4-3-2-1 is 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. You can use any rendition of that. And so if just listening to music is grounding, or just smelling essential oils is helpful, or for me, eating an orange was really helpful, or eating gum or candy or small snacks, Pop Rocks, because, the candy Pop Rocks, because you're looking for some sort of sensation, and that gets you back into your body. And so that can be very helpful. So that is one thing. There is also body awareness as far as like clenching and unclenching different muscles in your body and bringing your awareness to your toes, and you tighten them, then you loosen them, and moving up your body. That never worked for me. I never had the patience for it. So although now, it's funny, as I'm talking about this, I'm like, a lot of these things I do now, but it didn't work for me when I was really, really struggling when I was a young adult. I do actually kind of push my hands together when I'm feeling stressed, and that is very comforting. So even some deep pressure can be helpful. Just going to read a couple of the ones that they've got listed here. Is talk about anchoring, and this is interesting because I actually do this, and I never really knew it was like a coping mechanism. It was just one of the things I did. But their example is, I'm Natasha Daniels. I'm 52 years old. I live in Phoenix, Arizona. Today is Friday, June 3rd. Like, just anchoring yourself. What is interesting is that I naturally do that when I'm feeling stressed. I started doing that when my husband died. I would start to feel overwhelmed and start to feel like things aren't real, because everything felt so unreal when somebody just suddenly passes away. And because I already have a history of depersonalization, I was ripe for that. And I would just be like, I am in this moment. I am in my house. I'm sitting in this chair. I'm eating breakfast right now. So I guess I would do that. Who knew? So maybe some of these things just come out and you just do them. There's a lot of other things that you can do. I'll definitely just encourage you to check out this website. Some people like to hold ice and have like a cold sensation. Some people like to put their feet in the grass. Some people like to have deep pressure. or tactile things. Some people might like to go do something like pet a cat or a dog. You really want to think about the body and the physical sensations. That is really helpful. A weighted blanket, a weighted vest can be really helpful, or just something heavy on you can be helpful. So I will link this really great website so you can check it out and look at some of these grounding exercises and see what might be helpful. The key is not to tell your kids, you need to do this, or you need to do that, or use your coping mechanisms. It's getting them to tap into what helps them. What do they find helps them the most? And so here are some options that other people do. Let's talk about what might help you. And the next time you're experiencing this, let's try one of these if you want to, right? You have to be very gentle, like if you want to. This is just a suggestion from other people who are struggling with this. The other thing that I like about this website is that they have a recovery tab and they have recovery stories. And I really like that because I feel like that can be very uplifting for people who are struggling. You definitely want to read them first. Just make sure, that they're appropriate for your kids. This isn't a kid website. It is just a DPDR website, but it is well done. And I always love success stories because I feel like one of the hardest things about mental health struggles is the hopelessness. And anytime we can tap into somebody who had the exact same struggle and was able to kind of pull themselves through it and have a successful time crushing it, that's very uplifting. And the more stories we can present to our kids who are feeling overwhelmed by having these things, the better. Because I have seen this dominate some people's lives where they get so consumed with it and they're so stuck that they have it. I remember I had one person in my office and he had it 24/7. Like mine was always episodic. I would have it periodically and then I would get nervous that I was going to have it again. My daughter, very similar. She has it episodically, but he was permanently living, and it was more existential OCD because he was permanently thinking he was in a dream, and it just destroyed his life. He couldn't get out of it, and he felt so overwhelmed. We had to work on these tools and skills to pull him from it, but feeling like there's other people out there who were in that boat and had those struggles and were able to get through it can be really helpful. So I will leave a link. It is releasedpdr.com. I don't know who they are. I just think it's a great website on this topic, and they're not a therapist, so take that with a grain of salt. And I think they do talk about treatment without medication, and I think medication is totally appropriate for people who need it. And so just want to throw that in there as well. But you can check out this website and hopefully have a good discussion with your child, teen, or young adult about these struggles and the tools that they can maybe use and your role in it, right? So your role of not providing that reassurance of you are real, this isn't a dream, or here, I'll pinch you, or look, I'll prove it to you, because those will turn into dependent compulsions and you're actually making it worse. And so recognizing the struggle, giving them the tools or supporting them through it, we can offer all that reassurance without fueling the struggle itself. So I hope that you found that helpful. I hope that you find the podcast helpful in general. If you are, don't forget to hit a star, to rate it. And if there is a place to leave a review, I know there isn't one, I think, on some places. I don't think there is one on Spotify. But if you can leave a review somewhere, I greatly appreciate it. And if you do, I'll be reading yours next time. Well, I hope that you find the sparkle in everything you do, and I'll talk to you again next Tuesday. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. To get additional support raising a child with anxiety or OCD, visit Natasha's online school of on-demand classes at atparentingsurvivalschool.com.